Hey everyone, and welcome back. You know I love a good deep dive, and you know I love bringing in the experts to help me break things down. So today we're talking about the new Fiscal Relationship Grant, or NFR grant, and I know you probably want the quick version right off the bat, like who's eligible? How do you apply? What does it even cover? And why is this such a big deal? Well, stick around because we're going to get into all of that. Plus, I found some really interesting details about how this grant program is trying to be more flexible and really put First Nations communities in the driver's seat. So to help us navigate all this, we have an expert in all things funding, especially when it comes to Indigenous communities here in Canada. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm good to dive in. So let's start with the basics. What is the NFR grant and why should First Nations communities be paying attention to it?
I think the best way to think about it is this. Imagine you're a community and you're trying to build a new school, or maybe launch a new health initiative, but you're stuck with like these short-term funding agreements that make it almost impossible to plan for the future. Well, the NFR grant is trying to change that. It's a partnership between the Government of Canada and the Assembly of First Nations. And it's aiming to provide a more stable and predictable funding stream for First Nations communities.
Okay, so that's a good start. But what makes this grant so different from other funding models that are already out there? I mean, what's the catch?
That's the best part. There isn't really a big catch. Unlike those traditional 5-year funding agreements that we're all used to, this one offers a 10-year renewable term. So that means more long-term planning, more breathing room for communities to implement their vision,
Yeah.
and way less time spent scrambling for funding every few years.
10 years. That's huge. That must be such a relief for communities trying to make those long-term plans.
Absolutely. And to make sure that the funding keeps pace with rising costs and population growth, there's actually a built-in escalator. So each year, the amount increases by at least 2%.
Okay, so it's long-term, adjusts for inflation. What about all that leftover money at the end of the year? You know, the funds that usually have to go back to the government.
Oh, that's another area where the NFR grant really stands out. Communities can keep any unspent funds. It's about empowering them to make decisions about how those resources are best used.
Wow, that's a game changer. No more last-minute spending sprees. That kind of flexibility, I think, could really open up some new possibilities. But I'm guessing it can't be a total free-for-all, right? There have to be some requirements for First Nations communities to qualify for this grant.
Yeah, you're right. There are some key requirements. To be eligible for the NFR grant, communities need to show that they have a strong track record of financial management. So that means having a solid financial administration law or policy in place and showing good financial performance over the past 5 years.
Okay, so they want to make sure the money is being managed responsibly. But what does good financial performance actually mean? Are we talking complicated spreadsheets and, all kinds of financial ratios?
Well, there are some financial checks, yeah, but they're really just designed to get a clear picture of a community's financial health, not to create unnecessary obstacles. They look at 5 key areas. It's kind of like a financial checkup. A little preventative care goes a long way.
Okay, so no need to panic if numbers aren't your thing. But what if a community is a little nervous about navigating all of this? Is there any help available?
Absolutely. The First Nations Financial Management Board, or FMD, is an amazing resource. They offer support to First Nations at no cost to help them understand the process, prepare their applications, and really just strengthen their financial management practices overall.
Oh, that's fantastic. So for any of our listeners who are already thinking, I'm in, how do I apply?
Right.
What are the steps?
The first step is to reach out to your regional Indigenous Services Canada office, or ISC. They can walk you through the whole process, answer your questions, and point you in the right direction.
Okay, so contact your regional ISC office. Got it. Now, what about deadlines? We don't want anyone to miss out on this opportunity.
You're right, deadlines are important. For First Nations interested in the NFR grant, they want to express their interest by September 30th for the upcoming fiscal year. However, if you're a tribal council or a First Nations-led service delivery entity,
Mhm.
like a health authority, you have a little bit more time. Your deadline is November 1st.
Okay, so mark your calendars, everyone. Whether you're a First Nation community or working with a tribal council or service delivery entity, there's still time to get started. And remember that FMB support is there to help you every step of the way.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the why and the how of the NFR grant, but let's get to the really exciting part. What does this funding actually cover? I mean, we've mentioned flexibility and control, but what does that look like in practice?
This is where it gets really interesting. The NFR grant is designed to cover a wide range of programs that are really essential for healthy and thriving communities. We're talking about 28 program areas across 6 crucial service areas: health, children, and families, education infrastructure, and environment, economic development, and governance.
Wow, that's a lot of ground. Can you give us some concrete examples? What are some of the specific programs within those service areas?
Absolutely. Let's start with health. The NFR grant covers programs like mental wellness, which supports culturally relevant mental health services, and suicide prevention initiatives. There's also healthy child development, which focuses on early childhood development programs and services. And of course, there's funding for essential healthcare services like primary care.
Those are all such important areas, especially given the unique challenges faced by many First Nations communities. It sounds like the NFR grant is really trying to address a wide range of needs. What about some of the other service areas? I'm particularly curious about infrastructure.
That's a big one. The NFR grant includes a community infrastructure program that helps communities build and maintain essential infrastructure, things like roads, bridges, water systems, and community buildings. And because housing is such a critical issue, there's a housing capital program dedicated to supporting new housing construction, renovations, and repairs.
So we're talking about real, tangible improvements to the quality of life in communities. It's not just this abstract funding. It's about creating better living conditions, better access to services, and a brighter future for First Nations people.
Exactly.
And let's not forget about economic development. The NFR grant recognizes that strong communities need strong economies. And so there's a specific program dedicated to community economic development, which supports initiatives that promote economic growth, create jobs, and build sustainable businesses. It's amazing how much of this grant covers. It's really about taking a holistic approach to community development, isn't it?
You got it. It's not just about funding programs in isolation. It's about seeing the bigger picture and providing communities with the resources they need to thrive in every aspect of their lives.
This is incredible stuff. We've covered a lot of ground in this first segment. We have explored the unique features of the new Fiscal Relationship Grant, delved into the eligibility requirements and the application process, and even taken a peek at the wide range of program areas that it covers. But we're just getting started. After a short break, we'll be back to dive even deeper into some of the specific program examples and discuss the broader implications of this new funding model. So stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were just starting to explore some of these amazing programs that are covered by the NFR grant.
Yeah, there's so many. It's like this grant was designed to say, hey, we trust you to know what your community needs. Here are the resources. Go make it happen.
Exactly. It really is about empowering First Nations communities to take control and build the future they envision.
So let's talk about mental wellness for a second. It seems like mental health is finally getting the attention it deserves, especially within Indigenous communities. Having dedicated funding for this, it could be a game changer.
It really could. The mental wellness program under the NFR grant, it supports a whole bunch of different initiatives, from culturally relevant mental health services to suicide prevention programs. It's about recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that First Nations communities need support that's tailored to their specific needs and their cultural context.
It's about time, honestly. What about healthy child development? Investing in kids is investing in the future.
You said it. The Healthy Child Development Program really aims to ensure that First Nations children have the best possible start in life. It supports early childhood development, including things like quality childcare, early education programs, and other essential services that can really help kids thrive.
It's amazing to think about the ripple effect that could have for generations to come.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about community infrastructure. I know a lot of First Nations communities have been struggling with outdated or inadequate infrastructure. How does the NFR grant address this?
This is a big one, and the NFR grant definitely steps up to the plate. The Community Infrastructure Program provides funding for a whole range of projects, including construction renovation and maintenance of community buildings, roads, bridges, water systems, you name it.
Sounds like they really thought of everything. What about housing? We all know that safe, affordable housing is a fundamental human right, and it's something that many First Nations communities have been fighting for.
Absolutely. The Housing Capital Program is specifically designed to tackle this issue. It provides funding for the construction, renovation, and repair of homes in First Nations communities, aiming to improve living conditions, reduce overcrowding, and really make sure that everyone has access to a safe place to live. It's heartwarming to think about families finally having access to the kind of housing they deserve. It's all about creating healthier, more sustainable communities where everyone can thrive. And that brings us to another really important aspect: economic development.
Right. Strong communities need strong economies, and that's where the Community Economic Development Program comes in. It supports First Nations in creating sustainable businesses, diversifying their economies, and building a brighter future for their people.
Can you give us some examples of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Imagine a community that wants to set up a sustainable tourism business. Or maybe they have a group of really talented artisans who need some support to market their products. This program can help them develop business plans, access training, and invest in the infrastructure they need to make those ideas a reality.
That's incredible. It's really about giving communities the tools they need to take charge of their own destinies.
Exactly. The NFR grant is about recognizing that First Nations communities are best positioned to know what they need and how to make it happen. It's about trusting them, supporting their vision, giving them the resources to build the future that they want.
It's a remarkable shift in thinking, isn't it?
It really is. It moves away from that top-down approach to funding and embraces a partnership that's based on respect, collaboration, and a belief in the power of self-determination.
Okay, so we've talked about how amazing the NFR grant is and all the awesome things that it covers. But let's be real. There are always challenges when it comes to implementing new programs. What are some of the potential hurdles that communities might face?
Well, one challenge is just simply getting the word out and making sure that everyone who's eligible actually knows about this opportunity. It's a new program, so it's going to take some time for the information to spread and for communities to really fully understand how it works and how to apply.
That makes sense. Like any new initiative, there's always a learning curve.
Another challenge is capacity. Some communities might not have the staff or the expertise to navigate that application process or manage the grant funds effectively. That's why the support from the FMB is so important. They can provide the training and guidance that communities need to succeed.
And I imagine some communities might just be hesitant to embrace such a significant change in how funding works. It can be daunting to step away from the familiar, even if the new approach is potentially much better.
Yeah, that's understandable. Change can be difficult, and there might be concerns about losing funding or having to navigate a new set of rules. It's important to remember that this is a partnership and that the government and the AFN are working together to ensure a smooth transition and provide ongoing support to communities.
It sounds like communication and collaboration are key here. The more information that's shared, the more comfortable communities will feel embracing this new model.
Absolutely. It's also crucial to recognize that the NFR grant isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a tool that communities can use to achieve their own goals, and there's a lot of flexibility built into the program to accommodate different needs and priorities.
That makes sense. It's about empowering communities, not dictating to them how they should operate. Now, I want to touch on something that I think is really important, the potential impact of this funding model on the long-term well-being of First Nations communities. We've talked about the specific programs, but what about the bigger picture?
This is where it gets really exciting. Imagine a future where First Nations communities have the financial resources and the autonomy to make decisions that truly reflect their values and priorities. Imagine communities where children have access to quality education, healthcare, and cultural programs, where families can afford safe and comfortable housing, and where economic opportunities abound.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
It's not just a dream, right? We're talking about real, tangible steps towards making that a reality.
Exactly. The NFR grant isn't a magic bullet, but it's a powerful tool for change by providing that long-term predictable funding and giving communities greater control over how those resources are used. It creates the conditions for real sustainable progress.
It's inspiring to think about the possibilities. And it's a reminder that we can't underestimate the power of investing in First Nations communities and supporting their journey towards self-determination.
Well said. The NFR grant is about so much more than just money. It's about acknowledging the inherent rights of First Nations people, recognizing their strength and resilience, and supporting them in building the future that they deserve.
We've covered so much ground in this episode. We've explored the nuts and bolts of the NFR grant, from eligibility and application to the incredible range of programs it covers. We've also talked about the potential challenges and the importance of support and collaboration. But we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to discuss.
There really is.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to diving even deeper into the broader implications of this new funding model and exploring what it means for the future of First Nations communities across Canada.
Me too. We'll be back after a short break to tackle those bigger picture questions and wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and takeaways for our listeners.
Okay, we're back, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the specifics of the NFR grant, but I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
I like that idea. We've talked about all the details, the eligibility, the programs, But it's important to think about what this funding model could mean for First Nations communities in the long run.
Right, it's not just about a new grant program, it's about a potential shift in the relationship between the Canadian government and First Nations. You hit the nail on the head. For years and years, funding for First Nations communities has been all about short-term agreements, limited flexibility, and, a lack of control over how those resources are actually used. The NFR grant is different. It's a move towards a system built on partnership respect and recognizing the right of First Nations to govern themselves.
It's about saying, we trust you to know what's best for your communities, and here are the tools to make it happen.
Exactly. With long-term predictable funding, communities can finally think beyond just reacting to immediate needs and start developing long-term plans that really address their unique priorities.
It's about being proactive and strategic, instead of just putting up fires all the time.
I couldn't agree more. Let's say a community wants to create a mental wellness strategy. In the past, they might have had to scramble for funding from a bunch of different places, each with its own rules and reporting requirements. With the NFR grant, they can design and implement a program that really meets their needs.
That kind of flexibility is so important. It shows that the government is serious about reconciliation and supporting First Nations in their journey towards self-determination.
It really does. It's more than just money. It's about acknowledging inherent rights and creating a future where those rights are respected.
It's about moving away from that top-down approach.
And really working together as partners.
Now, another thing I find exciting about this grant is its potential to help First Nations communities achieve greater economic independence.
Absolutely. When communities have the resources to build strong, sustainable economies, it benefits everyone.
It's about investing in the future, not just for First Nations, but for all Canadians.
I like how you put that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I want them to understand that the NFR grant is more than just a funding program. It's a chance for First Nations communities to shape their own futures, and for all of us to work together to build a more just and equitable Canada.
I love that. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their insights today. This has been an amazing conversation. And to our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive informative and maybe even a little inspiring. If you're looking for more information, be sure to check out the Assembly of First Nations website and the First Nations Financial Management Board website. They have tons of resources available. And of course, don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, Timely Trends and News, where I cover all sorts of fascinating topics just like this one. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming in.